So as someone who has like a really unorthodox kind of background, you mentioned the JD, the MBA, all that stuff. One question I often have, because I run into a lot of people who, I mean, not people who necessarily have like this much of a deviation from the standard CS path, say, but I often hear things that surprise me about like the ways in which their unusual degrees came in handy. So like for the JD, for example, what was like, did it help you argue, like arguing for interpretations of data in some way or mastering some soft skills? Like what was the biggest advantage of the JD?
I'll say maybe a couple of things here. So first of all, sometimes I'll be in a meeting and people will say, well, when you're a data scientist, how do you convince a stakeholder to do something? And I say they have a funny way of listening when I tell them I'm a lawyer and you need to listen to what I'm about to say about this particular issue. So for instance, when it comes to when it comes to data privacy, for instance, this is big. So in that last startup I was at, I might see some things that I thought were going to be highly problematic, and I would go to the CEO and I would say, hey, we have to change this. Like, I know what I'm talking about this, and I'll work with UX design to make this implemented in a pretty way, but we got to do it. And like a lot of people came up to me afterwards and would say, man, we were thinking the same thing, but we didn't have that sort of like sway. So that's number one. The other thing, number two, to think about what a trial is. A trial is a null hypothesis. You take a person who's innocent, and this is, I know, talked about in all the statistics textbooks, but I think it's still a good example. You have an idea that somebody is innocent, that there's no there there. That this is just a random event. And everything that's happening is a coincidence. This guy is innocent until proven guilty. And then you begin to throw different facts onto the case. And basically, well, if he was innocent, what are the chances that he'd be seen there and that he'd have a motive and that he was the same description and that he had a car that was yellow and it was a yellow car? And when you add these up, you begin to say, I have a reasonable doubt, but this is going beyond that. And you can think about that as a p-value threshold as well. Yeah. So basically, in the law, one of the big things you have to understand is that you can never assume, and you have to really disabuse yourself of your preconceived notions. And in data scientists, again, you can never assume. You have to disabuse yourself of your preconceived notions. And I think the law works more in the words, but the data science works more in the numbers, but they're very, very, very similar in terms of the way that you attack a problem. So it helped in that sense as well. And then, I mean, if you've ever read the back of a shampoo bottle, that's what it's like to go to law school. So I'm very ready to read. I'm very ready to read dense things, and sometimes there'll be a policy I have to read all the time. In my last startup, we would be doing fashion work. And we would be always getting like banned from different accounts because we would buy so much of fashion from one particular store, they wouldn't think we were real. And then they would send Hayward in, that's a fried chicken man, to speak to those people. And I unblocked a lot of those accounts using some legal skills. So it definitely helps like that.
That's a surprising advantage, is being able to go out and negotiate account unblocking. It's like you're kind of like a jack of all trades, or like.
Well, thank you. And what I do now is actually pretty key, because so now I might source my own clients. And so I'll say to them, like, I was speaking to a person I'm going to meet tomorrow, and she runs a fashion boutique. And I said, before you show me any of your Shopify data, I need to sign an NDA, because you're giving people's private information. If you haven't signed it, it's got to be signed. You can go to LegalZoom and get it, but even if it's generic, but it's going to protect you, it's going to protect me. And so a lot of those things have come in pretty handy.